Today, with one search, anyone can find whatever they want to buy, select the color, size, or amount wanted, and with a click of a button, purchase it and have it shipped directly to one store in a matter of business days. However, this modern-day convenience wasn't always the way things were. So how did the modern shipping industry develop, and what were the consequences? The creation of the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railway opened up the resources of the Midwest and markets of the nation to manufacturers through the establishment of cheap, efficient bulk transportation. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad allowed consumers to make purchases from companies anywhere in the nation, have it delivered to them, and was therefore the most effective development in creating the modern consumerist structure, causing mass environmental degradation and pollution. For most of human history, the goods and items people had were produced by hand locally and by a specialist. Items were unique, high quality, and expensive. Most families could only afford a few special things, and each possession was cherished and well cared for. As middle-class Lucy Larcom recalls from her move to Lowell in 1835, the brass-headed shovel and tongs, that it had been my especial task to keep bright, the 2 card tables, the 2 china mugs, my father's miniature, a treasure only shown occasionally to us children as a holiday treat, and my mother's easy chair, were all carefully packed and brought to their new home. Larcom remembers the care her parents took to preserve their few purchased belongings and how special it was for the children to even see them. While this may seem odd today, when everything is a click away, this was the norm for a middle-class family before railroads. Through the early 19th century, the volume of trade, both domestic and foreign, was necessarily kept within proportions relatively small as compared with present traffic, because of the slowness and high costs of inland transportation. While manufactured goods were becoming cheaper, their markets were limited due to the high cost of freight shipping, explaining the scarce belongings of families like Lucy Larcom's. Unbeknownst to a young Larcom, this was all about to change. As innovation brought the steam engine, the nation was beginning to rethink shipping and transportation. While newly built steamships were chugging along the same routes ships had for centuries, the United States arrived at a new horizon of land transportation. This change was most present in the Midwest, where, in 1849, Illinois passed a law that allowed waterways to be bridged for railroads, as long as ships could pass under. However, no laws regulated chimney stacks height nor bridge clearances, and conflict quickly arose. Steamships pummeled into bridges during high tides, and in 1852 the Wheeling Bridge case made its way to the Supreme Court. The Wheeling Bridge was too low for steamboats to clear, and the Supreme Court favored waterborne commerce, ruling that bridging more rivers would end steamboat shipping and result in the abandonment of rivers. However, Justice Peter V. Daniel warned that the rapidly increasing and beneficial system of railroad communication is broken up and a system of local monopoly and inequality sustained. The railroad industry of the 1850s was not yet profitable enough to outcompete waterways for transportation. Still, railroads were expanding. In 1846, Scientific American noted that railroads can be profitably used in carrying heavy freights at low rates, and that they will come into successful competition with navigable rivers. And they were right. The Philadelphia and Reading Railroad's margin of profit increased from 88 cents per ton of coal in 1861 to $1.72 per ton in 1865. Overland transportation was beginning to soar. Starting as an Illinois railroad, the Rock Island and LaSalle Company dreamed of connecting Chicago to their Midwestern routes, eventually spanning to California. By purchasing a number of smaller Midwestern companies, they successfully expanded and in 1866 rebranded as the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad Company. They gained financial strength by specializing in coal and other resource freight shipping. Its value was shown when steamboat F.E. Afton crashed into the Rock Island Bridge, causing owner Jacob Hurd to sue for obstruction of navigation down the Mississippi. Defense attorney Abraham Lincoln argued that the railroad's bridge was more valuable. He compared 4 months of freight transport records showing that bad weather prevented steamboat shipping while railroad freight continued at full speed. Hurd pushed the case to the Supreme Court, which in 1867 ruled, a maritime lien can only exist upon movable things engaged in navigation or upon things which are subjects of commerce on the high seas or navigable waters. It cannot arise upon anything which is fixed and immovable. It does not, therefore, exist upon a bridge. The Supreme Court decision prioritized the railway's infrastructure over all steamboat shipping on the northern end of the Mississippi. While some historians argue that steamships were the precursor to the modern shipping industry, the Supreme Court decision suggests that steamships weren't effective for shipping. Without the rail industry, manufacturers would not have had the financial success to expand internationally. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific routes opened up Midwestern coal mines, lumber yards, and more to the industrial east while fueling developments. Chicago was a meager settlement in the 1820s, but after railroad expansion grew to a population of 298,977 by 1870. The exploitation of the Appalachian coal mines and North American boreal forest belt was well underway. Since 1800, 54% of the United States coal production has come from Appalachian mines, which are inaccessible by canals and waterways. The increase in raw materials caused a manufacturing boom, which brought further growth to Midwestern cities. The decade 1880 to 90 saw an exceptionally rapid development of the manufacturing industries, causing the number of towns of 8,000 plus population to rise from 286 to 448, an increase of 162 as compared with an increase of 60 in 1870 to 80. Raw material use in manufacturing increased because of railroads. For farmers, the direct effect of railroad development was a decrease in transportation and transaction costs, motivating Midwestern farmers to produce for the market and away from self-sufficiency. Abundant goods needed new markets, which the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad provided by connecting new towns as far as California. This shift from self-sufficiency to large-scale production is exemplified by the rise of the mail-order industry. According to an article by Brian Potter, between 1815 and 1860, the cost of moving manufactured goods overland fell by 95%. Railroads enabled companies to send goods across vast distances while maintaining affordable prices. Corporations began sending catalogs of goods to customers' homes, and consumers mailed in their orders, which were filled and shipped to them. These catalogs' object is to enable persons living outside of the city to obtain goods cheaply, promptly, and satisfactorily. The same in every respect as if personally purchased at the counter. Catalogs contained everything from shirts to shoes, Bibles to games, and some even had mail-order homes and pets. They were so popular that stores dedicated entire offices to handling mail order. The change was immense. Only a few years ago, the American farmer not only raised his own food, but furnished his own fuel and sometimes made his own clothing. Formerly, the farmer made his own tools. Now he buys implements made in factories. Mail order was a blessing for rural Americans who were no longer limited by local shop selections, but a curse for many living in cities. With the mail order boom came the consequences of pollution. Vast volumes of smoke and torrents of unconsumed sulfurous coal are poured out upon Chicago, to the disgrace of the Common Council, to the discomfort of the public, and to the injury of the property of the people. The smoke nuisance, or so it was called, was so bad the Chicago Tribune stated it was worse than stink factories because of the lung and throat damage and grime it caused. A change in coal sourcing from cleaner East Coast coal to less dense Appalachian coal was a major part of the pollution problem. One investigation found that it is noticeable in New York, Boston, and other eastern cities that formerly, when but little other fuel than anthracite was used, the atmosphere was clear and unobjectionable. In these days, however, with improved facilities for transporting to these cities the more distant bituminous coals, an increasing proportion of the latter is used, and complaints of the growing smoke nuisance are more frequently heard. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad enabled the use of Appalachian coal and also directly brought environmental pollution, as locomotives add very largely to the pollution of the atmosphere in the city because of their concentration in a few localities which are so disposed as to produce great volumes of smoke. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad allowed manufacturers to get raw materials from wherever was cheapest, and consumers could purchase whatever they wished from wherever it was produced and have it shipped to their homes, leading to the modern consumerist mentality. People no longer cherish their few items like Lucy Larcom's family did. Instead, the ability to get anything at any time increased consumption. According to Literature Review, exploring relationships between environmentalism and consumerism in a market economy society, household consumption alone contributes nearly 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions, including 50 to 80% natural resource use. But Boston University researchers found that most of the waste generation in a consumer society occurs during the extraction, processing, or manufacturing stages. Shipping pollution from sea-based vessels is estimated to account for 3% of greenhouse gas emissions and may rise to as much as 18% by 2050. Consumers no longer knew where their goods were coming from and were able to ignore the environmental impacts of them. Conservation became less important because there were still plenty of resources in other regions, which the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad gave 19th century U.S. industry access to, which has now expanded internationally and through the internet. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railway was a railroad empire which thrived by shipping freight. As a part of the transitional era from waterways to overland shipping, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad fueled industry expansion by inexpensively transporting raw materials to factories, later affordably shipping goods from manufacturers to consumers. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad enabled the mail order industry, creating the modern consumer and shipping industries. Subsequently, these attitudes and actions generated environmental damage, both in the 19th century as seen through coal-burning pollution and in the 21st as seen through greenhouse gas emissions.